Welcome everybody to our AI video series. Today I am joined by Mr. Jeff DeVerter. We're going to teach you how to cut through that AI noise and all the rest. The session provides practical advice to help you prioritize those high value use cases over technical distractions, business distractions, coffees, teas, recess, all those things that might negatively affect the choices you make and the roadmap that gets delivered. And of course, the outcomes you're actually trying to create, which we can only assume is high ROI, high return on the investment that you're spending money on this awesome stuff. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is selling you on this AI transformation. It could be a bunch of partners and a bunch of vendors, technology companies, individual consultants. Unfortunately, how most enterprises are doing it, they're building a lot of awesome use cases that are creating a pretty significant pilot graveyard. In fact, vast majority of roadmap are these 50, 100 pilots that sometimes but rarely get to production. Very chatbotty, very department centric. And if all that's true, then Jeff and I are here to have a quick chat with you. Jeff, we've seen this a lot of times. Board gets excited. Board creates a budget, gives it to the CIO. CIO gets excited, wants to deliver value as quickly as they can. So what? What's next? What do they do?
What do they do? Well, they spin up a whole bunch of people who get really excited about it, get a bunch of internal infrastructure, and I mean people infrastructure, and they go forth and they create a whole bunch of chatbots. Well, you see a couple of things. You see massive amounts of chatbots, in fact, probably more than they have employees, and then you also see some interesting custom build things, which in and of themselves are kind of cool. But what oftentimes happens is they go down that road they're going on vacation without having a map and they don't know how to get there. How are they going to get to Wally World? In this case, they've got to get to a position where not only do they have a great idea about what is possible, what can they do, and how can they deploy it and manage it over time? Because you've got to think that ideation, that creation, and the operation phase. And so many projects, so many AI endeavors end up in pilot purgatory because they can't and don't have the skills or abilities or knowledge of how to complete that.
In fact, what we see much more often is a whole bunch of activity, right? A whole bunch of projects, a whole bunch of rolling up their sleeves and learning tools and technologies and trying things out, but no outcomes, or at least limited outcomes.
Limited outcomes.
Is that a pattern? Like, we've done this 50 times. Are we seeing this time and time again?
Time and time again. In fact, the phrase that you said it a minute ago, pilot purgatory. These ideas get spun up and they don't get followed through. There's no governance around who can do what. There is no communication plan. You know what, Paul? Here's the big problem. People think that AI, as magical as it is, will deploy itself. AI requires the same rigor that your IT projects need. Who knew? And if you don't apply that, then you ultimately don't get the outcome. And also, if you choose AI projects that maybe don't have a great ROI or the potential for it, or better yet, AI where it's really hard to measure, because those exist too, then it gets hard to go back to the board and say, look what we've done.
So if we were to give you a piece of advice, it would be this: stop doing AI everywhere badly. Instead, let's deep dive, right? Let's do a few of those workflows that will create very high ROI, move the needle on the P&L, move the needle on the employee engagement, and stick to those versus trying a bunch of things out. Which is the first kind of thought process here is, well, what do we mean when we say sort of death by 1,000 chatbots, right? What do we mean when we say focusing on people productivity might not be your best bet? What's the rule of thumb here? How do we get outside of that sort of thought process?
So that's it's a killer question, because what we don't want to necessarily do is over pivot one direction or another. So let's start with the concept of let's choose a few of these AI workflows. And the use of the word workflow is really important here, because what we're talking about is an existing process inside an organization that can be automated with the addition of AI to help that process be successful. Now, what that also means is we have a level of expectation that the users know how to interact with AI. So it's important to focus on a narrow band of these types of workflow type deliveries, these work products that are going to be delivered with AI's assistant. But there is value in that people productivity side. We just don't want to look at that through the lens of it's the only thing we're going to go do, because the more that we can get the people productivity folks digging into using AI daily, it builds the muscle memory. Now, we haven't hung our hat on the fact that that's the only success metric. It's just a good foundational skill to help make these other ones much more successful.
I've heard you use the phrase paper cut use case, which I've used many times because I think it aptly applies to looking at people productivity use cases, right? You can think of it as saving 1 to 5 minutes in an individual user, and you can multiply that by 1,000 users, but you can't really add that together in terms of real cost savings. So I could choose saving 5 minutes for 1,000 people, or I could choose saving 2 weeks for one person. And the 2 weeks AI use case is actually the best one. Why is that?
Well, it's focused, it is definable, and that's a real 2 weeks that you can really measure. Those 5 minutes across 1,000, super hard to actually go measure. It's like saying, how much time did you save because you used autocorrect and didn't have to go look how to spell a word? Indefinable, but does raise the potentially the quality of outputs of those 1,000. But when we talk about doing it for that one, that gets really important. In fact, we might even say that if that timeline of savings was less, but we could take the quality of what's being created and raise that up discernibly, then we need to make sure that we're not just measuring on time saved, but quality of output.
It's also an obvious distraction, right? Saving 5 minutes every day isn't as helpful as saving a 2-week project that happens every quarter, because that person still has to do their everyday job. So if I can take that 2 weeks away, I've now removed the entire backlog of 2 weeks worth of work, of their actual work, and they can continue to do that.
And Paul, we've used the line before. I've seen this 1,000 times. Feels like 1,000 after all these 50. But when we look at that 2 weeks saved, you know what happens? That person still spends 2 weeks. Do you know what? Because they're solving that problem. That 2 weeks is now being created in an hour. I'm making a number up here. And they're going to use that 2 weeks to make the result of that. We're not doing that thing for the sake of the thing. We're doing it in service of the business. And now we can serve the business better.
Right. So 2 classic mistakes we see all the time that are easily changed. So classic mistake number 1, tech first, tool first, business second. Are you recommending that to be different?
Yeah, it's a bad idea. Hey, we've chosen Snowflake. So everybody, and by the way, I love me some Snowflake. This isn't shade on Snowflake, but if we've chosen one tool for one thing, it doesn't mean it's good at everything. Because quite frankly, I don't have my bottle of water with me. I'm surprised it doesn't say bottle of water now with AI, because AI is a feature in everything you buy. It doesn't mean that it's good at everything across the organization. So is Snowflake, by example, does it have some great AI capabilities? Yes, in the context of its data, but maybe not necessarily across the context of everything. And so choosing the right AI for the right solution becomes extraordinarily important. By the way, that drags us into a governance conversation. Everybody loves the governance conversation. They don't really. That's sarcasm. And but it becomes super important to make sure we're choosing the right tool for the right challenge, but that doesn't mean we use that AI tool for everything.
We also see a lot of AI for everybody, right? It's almost an exclusive AI strategy for IT, where IT no longer exists, only AI exists, which of course is odd, because applications still exist, right? There is a portfolio that you need to deal with. You still have an ERP and a CRM. There is business to be done, and therefore if business needs to be done, they all have care and feeding too. Your applications don't go away, so maybe spend time on those.
Maybe spend time on those. Yeah, where this A is not a replacement for your day job, it's additive to your day job. So
Right.
you do have things that will need to be done in that AI infrastructure, and it will impact. We're not going to say it gets rid of everything, but we're not going to say it gets rid of nothing. There is more work to be done to figure that out. All of the blocking and tackling still has to be done. It doesn't AI coming in doesn't wave a magic wand and get rid of your operations, your observability, your monitoring, your backup, your all of the IT strategy that you still have to do.
Okay, so let's give them the most important piece of advice. How do you select the highest ROI use cases?
Well, you do that through the course of a workshop. We're going to talk more about that later, because you have to put them all up on a board and evaluate them. You're going to find some that they're easy to implement, and they are relatively easy to create, and you have access to the data. Generally speaking, they impact a smaller amount of people, but the quantity is generally pretty high. If you can find a bunch of those and stack them together and attack, great idea. But then you also have to look at ones that that maybe take a little bit more effort to create. But really, and I mentioned it in the last bit, is that access to the data to be able to deliver that AI solution usually is the long pole in the tent. But this speaks to why it's important to get them all on a screen, all on a whiteboard, all in an Excel, whatever your flavor is, and be able to look at them together and plot them in a meaningful roadmap way.
So we like to think of it as a dimensions of frequencies and volumes, right? Or costs and volumes. So we want to be able to pick the ones that have the most impact for the organization, not the most impact for John and Sally and Sue. Comparative.
That's right.
Okay. So how do we help them do that? What's this workshop you speak of? Tell me more about that process.
For sure. And what I oftentimes will say to folks is, look, if you're interested in being more successful with AI, having a defined roadmap that shows real AI success in the next 90 days, and having that curated use case registry that's prioritized, well, that's what the AI workshop is all about. It's broken down into two pieces: educate and activate. We make sure we're all spelling AI the same way, and then we apply that to the understanding the AI readiness of the infrastructure, and then it's all about use case prioritization and understanding, where the quantity and the quality really starts to show up in those, and based on business needs, plot them in a way that makes sense.
We like the term, we want to come up with a short, brutal, prioritized list of use cases that actually deserve investment and positive ROI, right? So right. I'm going to spend $1 million. I want back $10 million. And I want this to be a list of 10, not a list of 50. So kill those 50 chatbot roadmaps. Deep dive on both people productivity and process productivity use cases that matter, not 5 minutes, but 2 weeks. And make sure that there's an actual ROI. So it's not a tool-based decision, it's an outcome-based decision. That was great. Jeff, you're awesome, as usual. This was our episode on prioritizing AI use cases. And next up, we're going to talk about owning ROI, and giving AI to the IT guy might not be the right move. Thanks, everyone.